Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today we are diving into a massive, just a really fascinating collision of ideas. On one side, we have the boundless, mystical optimism of wealth affirmations. Those midnight mantras telling you that you are a money magnet and the universe provides effortlessly.
Right, the whole cosmic optimism thing.
Exactly. And on the exact opposite side, we have the brutal, sobering reality of financial psychology, which basically proves our brains are fundamentally wired to sabotage our own bank accounts.
Yeah, it is a profound clash. You're basically taking infinite abundance and slamming it headfirst into our very flawed, very human cognitive biases.
And that is the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to see if we could shortcut our way to genuine financial wisdom by merging these two totally different paradigms. And before we start breaking down our first psychological trap, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. So I want to look at where these two sources violently disagree right out of the gate, because the affirmations demand a pretty radical mental shift.
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, the instructions for you, the listener, are to boldly declare, and I quote, "I move from poverty thinking to abundance thinking."
Right.
And you're supposed to intentionally release all negative energy about money to become receptive to all the wealth that life offers. So the underlying premise is that you can just clear the slate and choose a reality of optimism.
See, I read that and immediately hit a wall, because I'm looking at our psychology source, which argues that simply deciding to shift our minds, like just by speaking words into the ether, is nearly impossible.
Yeah, because we don't operate on a blank slate at all.
Right. We operate inside this very rigid bubble of personal history, don't we?
Exactly. Our financial worldview is completely tethered to what we have personally lived through. It's deeply ingrained.
This reminds me of? It is like trying to install a brand new software update on a computer that has a deeply cracked hard drive.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the code in the update might be flawless, right? But the machine literally cannot process it because the hardware is broken.
Right.
We try to plan like cold spreadsheets, but we're emotional creatures.
That analogy is spot on. The psychology material backs it up perfectly. The cracked hard drive is your past experience. So, two really intelligent people can look at the exact same investment, the exact same data, and make completely opposite choices.
Because of that bubble.
Right. Neither of them is crazy. They just have entirely different emotional lenses shaped by their pasts. Let's look at the specific example the source gives. Imagine a tech worker who started investing during the massive dot-com boom of the 1990s.
Oh, wow. Okay, so everything is just going up for them.
Exactly. Their hard drive is programmed by a reality where the stock market is this magical place of endless opportunity, so their baseline risk tolerance is incredibly high. Now, contrast them with someone who graduated college and entered the workforce during the 2008 crash.
Oh, man, their introduction to money was just pure panic.
Pure panic. Their hard drive is covered in emotional scar tissue. They might fear the stock market for the rest of their lives, deeply convinced that the system is rigged.
Right.
Your personal lived experience makes up maybe a fraction of a percent of what has actually happened in global economic history, but it dictates almost 100% of how you believe the world works.
Which, brings up something I really struggled with while reading the affirmations, because they lean heavily on this idea of absolute total control over your destiny.
They really do.
Yeah, they literally have you repeat, "I place no limits on the amount of money I can make, and I am the master of my wealth."
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the psychology material, this idea of total mastery feels almost dangerous.
It is dangerous. I mean, it completely ignores the mechanics of how success actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
The psychology source breaks down success into a messy combination of effort, luck, and risk.
Right. Effort, luck, and risk.
Yeah. If we convince ourselves we are 100% in control, we become completely blind to the massive roles that luck and risk play in every single outcome.
Wait, but the affirmations literally say, "Success is mine, I accept it now." So does believing we're in complete control actually make us blind to risk? How does that play out in the real world?
Well, we ignore the unseen variables. Take the story of Bill Gates from the source material. Everyone acknowledges his brilliance, right? His discipline, his business strategy.
Loves a genius.
But the narrative usually leaves out the mathematical anomaly of his luck. Back in the 1970s, he had the 1-in-a-million fortune to attend Lakeside School.
Oh, right. That was the high school with the rare computer.
Exactly. One of the only high schools in the world that had a computer terminal. So he got thousands of hours of programming practice before 99% of the planet even knew what a computer was.
That is a wild head start.
It is. But the source introduces the other side of the coin to illustrate risk. His high school best friend, Kent Evans.
Kent Evans.
Yeah, by all accounts, Evans was equally brilliant and equally obsessed with computers. He and Gates were supposed to conquer the tech world together.
Wait, what happened to him?
He experienced a 1 in a million stroke of catastrophic bad luck. He died in a mountaineering accident before graduation.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard that story.
It's heartbreaking, but it shows the reality of risk. Two brilliant minds, same work ethic, but wildly different outcomes based entirely on variables they couldn't control. You can do everything right and still lose. Or, make terrible decisions and get bailed out by luck.
So why do we reject that reality? I mean, why does it feel so much better to chant, I am the master of my wealth?
Because our brains crave certainty. The psychology source calls these appealing fictions. We are biologically driven to tell ourselves comforting stories.
Appealing fictions, right.
Yeah, because acknowledging that a random market crash or a health crisis could wipe out our hard work is terrifying. So we buy into these appealing fictions to soothe that anxiety.
Like the 2021 crypto boom.
Perfect example. Millions of people bought into a dream sold by influencers, completely ignoring the underlying math. Because the narrative of getting rich quick was a comforting story. It's the exact same psychological mechanism behind buying a lottery ticket.
Right, your logical brain knows the odds are terrible.
Like 1 in 300 million. But the dopamine hit of imagining yourself on a yacht, well, it just overrides the math.
Let me push this a step further, because this is where the two sources really start to grind against each other. If we buy into those comforting stories and we convince ourselves we're the masters of the universe, it seems like we start chasing the wrong goals.
How so?
Well, the affirmations don't just talk about security. They heavily emphasize the visible aesthetics of wealth. They use phrases like enjoying a lifestyle of luxury and visualizing a wallet overflowing with money.
Ah, yes. They focus on the performance of wealth, the markers you can show off to society.
Exactly. But the psychology source issues a massive warning about this exact behavior. It calls it the never enough trap. And, to understand this, let's scale it down to a normal scenario before we look at the billionaires.
Okay, lay it out.
Imagine someone making $60,000 a year. They get a promotion to $80,000. But instead of saving that $20,000 difference, they immediately finance a more expensive car and move into a pricier apartment.
Right, so their lifestyle scales up aggressively to match their new income, meaning their actual wealth, their financial safety net hasn't grown an inch.
They just look richer to their neighbors. And the source takes that exact psychological flaw and shows what happens when it infects someone at the top. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of the FTX crypto exchange.
SBF, right.
Yeah, in 2021, at just 29 years old, his net worth was estimated at over $20 billion.
$20 billion. I mean, you couldn't spend $20 billion in a lifetime if you tried to. Your family would be secure for generations.
But it wasn't enough. He risked the entire empire, quietly mixing customer funds and taking massive illegal gambles. And for what? Not to feed his family. He did it to chase more status, more influence, more magazine covers.
Because he never defined the word enough. His ego pushed him until the whole thing collapsed overnight.
And he ended up in prison.
That is the ultimate manifestation of the ego trap. Chasing the appearance of wealth is the very mechanism that destroys actual financial independence. And there's a brilliant framework in the psychology material called the man in the car paradox that explains why we do this.
Oh, I'm obsessed with this concept. Please explain how this works.
It's so good. So when you see someone driving a $100,000 Ferrari down the street, your biological impulse is not to admire the driver. You don't think, wow, the person behind the wheel must be incredibly smart and successful.
Wait, really? Because I feel like that's the whole point of buying the car.
That's what we tell ourselves. But instead, your brain bypasses the driver completely and imagines you in that driver's seat. You think, if I had that car, people would admire me.
That is wild. So we are buying outrageously expensive things to impress people who aren't even looking at us.
Exactly.
They are just using our stuff as a mirror for their own desires to be admired. It's a complete illusion. Looking rich is like buying a Hollywood movie set.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like from the street, it looks amazing to the neighbors. But if you open the front door, there's just dirt and some wooden scaffolding. There is no actual house behind it. Wealth is the silent foundation.
That brings us to the core definition of true wealth across these sources. Wealth is what you do not see.
What you don't see.
Right. Wealth is the money that didn't go toward the luxury car, or the upgraded wardrobe, or the flashy vacation you posted online. It is the unspent financial assets sitting quietly in investment accounts.
So if true wealth is that invisible silent foundation, how do we actually build it? Because the affirmations have a very specific, almost magical take on this.
They claim money flows easily and effortlessly, right?
Yeah. Yes, like a waterfall. But I have to admit, looking at a stock chart during a recession does not look effortless. It looks like a nightmare. Where is the effortless part?
Well, we have to completely redefine what effortless means here. The psychology material argues that investing is absolutely not free of effort or pain. It carries a heavy, hidden price tag.
A price tag.
Yes, and that price isn't measured in dollars. It is measured in the emotional stress of volatility.
Ah, the emotional toll. Because a spreadsheet doesn't feel a knot in its stomach when a portfolio drops 30% in a week, but a human being definitely does.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of this using the Netflix example from the text. Between 2002 and 2018, Netflix stock returned more than 35,000%.
35,000%, that's insane.
Looking back, it seems like an effortless mountain of cash. But to actually capture that return, an investor had to hold the stock while it spent 94% of that 16-year period trading below its previous all-time high.
Wait, hold on. For 94% of the time, you are logging into your account, looking at your screen, and feeling like you are losing money.
Yes. You are enduring years of fear, doubt, and the intense temptation to just sell and walk away. The psychology source argues we need to stop viewing market volatility as a punishment for doing something wrong.
Right.
And start viewing it as a fee. It is simply the price of admission for long-term growth. Volatility is a fee, not a fine.
That completely flips the perspective.
It does. Getting wealthy requires you to be bold, take risks, play offense. But keeping that wealth requires the exact opposite toolkit. It requires paranoia, caution, and a massive margin of safety.
So when the affirmations say wealth comes effortlessly, is the only truly effortless part the patience required to just leave your investments alone and let time do the work?
Bingo. Time is the actual mechanism of wealth generation. It's far more powerful than raw talent or high incomes. Consider the math behind Warren Buffett's fortune.
Okay, lay the Buffett math on me.
The source notes his net worth is around $160 billion. But the staggering reality is that $156 billion of that came after his 65th birthday.
Wait, really? $156 billion after he turned 65?
Yep. It is the snowball effect of compounding interest in action.
That just breaks my brain.
It's the math of survival. And what's even more illustrative is how few decisions actually built that snowball. Nearly all of Buffett's immense wealth was generated from just 10 explosive tail events.
Just 10 out of his whole career.
Just 10. Out of thousands of trades over his lifetime, just 10 massive wins, like buying Coca-Cola in 1989, did almost all the heavy lifting.
So you don't have to be a genius day trader making brilliant moves every morning. You just have to build a defensive foundation that allows you to survive long enough to catch a few of those rare, massive waves.
Survival is the entire game. If you panic and sell during a downturn, you interrupt the compounding process and the math just resets.
Wow. Okay, this forces us to ask the ultimate question. We've decoded the mechanics, we survive the volatility fee, we build the invisible foundation of unspent assets so we let time compound our money.
Right.
But what is the actual point? If the goal isn't a wallet overflowing with cash so we can buy a Ferrari and participate in the man-of-the-car paradox,
Right.
what are we sacrificing our current desires for?
Well, decades of psychological research provide a very clear answer to this. The absolute highest dividend that money pays is not material goods. It is controlling your time.
Control your time.
Yes. It is the ability to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want, when I want, with who I want, for as long as I want.
It's autonomy.
Complete autonomy. And this totally changes how we should view saving money. Most people think you only save for a specific goal, like a down payment on a house or a new car.
But the source argues you don't actually need a specific goal to justify saving.
Exactly. You save to create a gap between your ego and your income. Think back to the ego trap we talked about earlier.
And the guy getting the promotion of buying the car.
Right. If an executive makes $300,000 a year but carries a massive mortgage, leases 2 luxury cars, sends their kids to elite private schools, their lifestyle has grown to consume their entire income.
They have no gap.
None. If they hate their job or face a health crisis, they are totally trapped. Saving without a goal just builds a reservoir of flexibility. It gives you the power to pivot, to take a lower-paying job you actually love, or to just walk away from a toxic environment.
But how do we plan for a future of flexibility when we are constantly told we need rigid 20-year financial plans? Like, how do you map out a future when you don't even know what you'll want?
Ah, that hits a fascinating cognitive wall called the end of history illusion.
The end of history illusion. What is that?
So biologically, our brains find it very easy to look backward and recognize how much our personalities and goals have changed over the last decade.
Sure, I'm way different than I was 10 years ago.
Right. But we lack the imaginative processing power to simulate how our emotional states will change in the future. We falsely believe that whoever we are today is the final finished version of ourselves.
Oh, I see. We assume the movie of our life has finally reached the last act, and we'll just coast from here.
Exactly. So you might sit down today and confidently declare, I will never want to live in the suburbs, or I want to retire by 40. And you build a highly aggressive, inflexible financial plan around that exact lifestyle.
But 10 years from now, you will literally be a different person with different values.
Right. Because our future desires are so unpredictable, locking yourself into extreme financial commitments is a recipe for regret. The defense against the end of history illusion is moderation.
Moderate.
Moderate savings, a moderate lifestyle, and moderate working hours.
Because a moderate plan acts like a shock absorber.
Yes, exactly.
It has the slack to bend without breaking when your life inevitably shifts direction. And, part of maintaining that moderation is making sure you aren't accidentally playing someone else's game.
Say more about that.
Well, if you are a long-term investor trying to build a shock absorber for your future self, you have absolutely no business copying the frantic stock tips of a day trader on social media. They are playing a game of momentum. You are playing a game of endurance.
That is so true. You inherit their risks without knowing their rules. You have to clearly define your own game, recognize your own timeline, and just aggressively tune out the noise that doesn't serve you.
This ties beautifully back to one specific affirmation from our first source, one that actually holds up to all this psychological scrutiny. Money is my servant, and I am the master. The ultimate mastery isn't a mountain of gold or a garage full of cars. It's the freedom to wake up and own your Tuesday.
It really requires a hybrid approach. The psychology source describes this as developing a barbell personality.
A barbell personality.
Yeah, on one end of the barbell, you need the extreme optimism and hope of the affirmations to get you off the couch, to take calculated risks, and to start building.
Yeah.
But on the other end, you need the healthy paranoia and defensive caution of psychology to ensure you survive the inevitable storms.
To be truly well-informed about money, you need the abundance mindset to get into the game, but you need the psychological armor to keep what you earn.
That's the perfect synthesis.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over a slightly uncomfortable question about how we value our own lives. We've talked about money as a tool for autonomy, right? And as a defense against the unpredictable future.
Yes, the flexibility gap.
But if the highest form of wealth is controlling your time, and the end of history illusion guarantees you will be a completely different person in a decade, here is the question.
Let's hear it.
Are you currently saving for the life you want today? Or are you building the flexibility that a total stranger, your future self, will desperately need tomorrow? Are we building wealth? Or are we just shuffling the hours of our lifespan on a balance sheet? Think about it.